All right, what's up, everybody? Me and Matt back at you this week after an awesome draft weekend on this past weekend. Wanted to just start off before we get into what we're talking about today. Matt, what was your highlight from Saturday's draft party?
It's close between Anthony rolling in like the $6 million man and Steve looking like a pimp that owns Dunkin' Donuts. But I gotta go with Steve. I mean, the pink hat, the tracksuito he had rocking, it's Steve. I mean, he came back out of hibernation from 5 years and not seeing any of us, to just looking like the sexiest owner of Dunkin' Donuts. So it's Steve. Gotta love the old guy.
Yeah, that was awesome. It's hard to well, what's the word I'm looking for? Out gimmick Badin, but Steve managed to out gimmick Badin. No one even noticed that Badin bought an Al Bundy Polk High jersey just for the draft because Steve came in looking like the donut pimp.
And I totally forgot about that until you said it.
Yeah.
That's sad. You pointed it out. I was like, holy shit, dude, he does have an Al Bundy jersey. And yeah, that fell completely flat.
Yeah,
Who'd have
no,
thought it?
not normal for a Din gimmick joke to not land. All right.
He'll make up for it next year. He'll make up for it next year.
Oh yeah, now that this happened, he's gonna come out in like some sort of like Transformers suit or something.
Sorry, Camden, you're not going to college. Your dad's got to spend some money.
All right, well
But
let's
what was your biggest surprise of the draft? The actual draft itself, good and bad. What's your biggest surprise from the draft?
uh it's a it's a great question. The biggest surprise was that uh quarterbacks didn't go insanely early. Um that's something that I typically have to plan for in our league that quarterbacks just tend to go higher. As I'm doing mock drafts, when you're mock drafting with people on sleeper, quarterbacks never go in the first four rounds. And so every time I was doing a mock draft, I had to think to myself, okay, this is, I guess, practice, but none of these players are going to be where they are. I'm going to be able to get great value because the quarterbacks are all being pushed up. And then I don't think we saw the first quarterback taken until the end of round three in our draft. Whereas if you look at last year, there was four quarterbacks taken in the second round, as early as the 1-2 turn. So that was the biggest surprise for me is that quarterbacks didn't go early. Once they did start to go, then you kind of started to see the run on them. But that happened later than it normally does in our draft.
You know, talking that it feels like there's been a change in our league in terms of the drafting. And you're right, because I think last year a quarterback went in the first round, a bunch went in the second round. Do you feel like this is the most even draft we've ever had?
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the reasons why is because the quarterbacks didn't go incredibly early. So you kind of saw player values kind of stick to where their ADPs were. Um, you know, Obviously throughout the draft, like people are taking, somebody that they believe in a little bit earlier than they would normally go in a mock draft or ADP. But for the most part, those first five-ish rounds, things were somewhat chalk. And then it was after that that things kind of started to get a little bit out of ADP. So I recall like being able to get T. Higgins and Rashi Rice in the sixth and seventh round. In the mock drafts I was doing, those guys were going in the fourth and fifth round. So I felt like I was able to get some really good value in the middle rounds, but the guys that I expected to be there, rounds 1 through 4, weren't really there. Part of my plan was going to be getting Ken Walker in the third round. Fourth round is what I wanted. And he ended up going beginning of the third round to Eddie, which I thought was a great pick, but went way ahead of where his ADP was. So just kind of had to adjust from there. But it all worked out. And yeah, this is definitely the strongest. I think Valerie said it at one point that she wasn't going to make the same mistakes that she's made in the past. Ryan said the same thing. Like he had made a lot of mistakes last year in the draft that he learned from, and then you could see it applied in his draft strategy this year. So that's really cool to see. I've always felt like this is a highly competitive league where people really care, and this year is the first year where I really thought really everyone had a good draft. And when I came up with those draft grades, it wasn't it wasn't artificial. It wasn't really me. It wasn't me not trying to offend anybody. It's really how I felt that everyone actually had a really decent draft. I think the way the league's going to go this year is it's really going to matter what happens between now and the end of the season in free agency and in trades. That's where I think the league is going to be won this year is in like what happens from this point because everyone had a really good draft.
Well, and I think, looking at your grades, there's a lot of B's. I mean, sorry, Din, you got like a C, but everyone else was a B. And I think you can split hairs on a lot of those, whether it's a B plus, a B minus, a B. And Anthony was the only one to get an A. Even though I disagree with that grade. Sorry, Anthony. Why'd you give Anthony an A?
Yeah, I
What made
mean,
his team above everybody else's?
I've come back to that one a couple of times since I even posted them. Because it is the one grade that kind of stands out in the grades that I gave. I think that could have gone anywhere between a B plus and an A. But when I went back and looked at it again, I think my initial thought was there's such great wide receiver depth on that team. Like the top, I think he has what Harrison and Wilson, right? Those were for his top two picks.
Yeah.
And so, even though Harrison is a rookie, I think he has like really high upside. He could be a top five wide receiver this year. Garrett Wilson could be a top five wide receiver this year, but they're not drafted as top five wide receivers. They're drafted as like 5 to 12 in the rankings, and so I think those are like potential home run hits that also have pretty safe floors. And then as the draft went on, some of the guys that he grabbed later on, like getting Ferguson in the 10th is really what solidified that grade for me as an A. Because my draft strategy typically is I like to get a good tight end. Like it's the years that I've won this league, I've had a Mark Andrews or I've had somebody really strong at tight end that's helped me differentiate. But that usually means that you have to spend high draft capital to get somebody like that. You got to take them in the third to fifth round when there's really good wide receivers and running backs there. What Anthony was able to do is he was able to wait. I don't know if this was intentional or not. It probably just fell this way where he didn't. I imagine he probably wanted Kincaid. I took Kincaid, so it kind of like forced him into a strategy where he had to wait a bit. And then he ended up getting someone that I think will probably be a top 6 or 7 tight end in Ferguson in the 10th round. And he didn't have to, that gave him a stud running back or wide receiver in those middle rounds. So I think because of what he was able to get with Ferguson, he has really good depth on his team that if he has injuries down the line, he's going to be able to weather that. Or if he doesn't have injuries down the line, he's got some really great pieces that he could trade to maybe combine a couple of pieces to level up a certain position. So that's why I have him as an A.
I think he's going to have to trade a receiver for a running back somewhere. All he's got is Mixon and Zamir White, which I think White could be a steal as well, given there's nobody else in Vegas. But that's it. He's got nothing else beyond that. So when there's bye weeks, he's going to have to figure out something somewhere.
Yeah.
Especially if one of those like Tank Dell or someone else just goes off and he can get some good value for him early. I think if he gets another running back piece, I think he's really going to be. He could really could that would make it an A grade for me.
That's a great point, Matt. And I definitely, do see the same thing when I look at his team. Um, I think if this happens every year where there's a major running back injury earlier in the season. If that handcuff is available on waivers, if I were Anthony, I would spend really big to get that handcuff because then you've solidified that position. So he's got the type of team right now where I would drop like 60 to 80% of fab on a starting running back if they were to come up in free agency because of an injury. But Well, good questions there, Matt. Fun to talk about the draft, my favorite time of year. But now we get into the rest of the season, which we start our matchups tomorrow. So we've got the kickoff of the season tomorrow, Eagles and Ravens, which what a
Chiefs
great
Ravens.
opening night game for us to get. So let's start with our matchups, and we'll start with Matt versus. Looks like we got Matt versus Sean. What's your review or preview and prediction for this matchup, Matt?
It, it's gonna be close. Like I said, this is the most even draft I think we've seen in a long time, where no one really is way out ahead of each other. But I do think him starting two rookie wide receivers. I know everyone believes in Neighbors, but Danny Dimes is thrown to him, and you never know what you're gonna get out of that one. Ramondre, I don't know what kind of work he's going to get or how much success he's going to have because that Pats offense is horrific. I think Terry McLaurin is going to take off this year with Jaden Daniels. And sucks to suck, Sean. I'm taking this one week one to go 1-0.
All right. Next matchup is me versus Val. Who do you got? What's the preview and who do you got?
In years past, this was the insert the easy win for Justin joke, and we moved on. There wasn't much analysis or breakdown, but Val was locked in. You made fun of Val at the draft. She told you to fuck off and just went back to her seat and she was focused. So Val really put in some good work there. But the wide receivers are going to be the difference. I don't like Val's receivers, and I think you're taking this one. But it's going to be close.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's gonna be a close one. All right, Steve versus Eddie. Who you got?
The new guy versus the old guy. Um, and this one's interesting because I like his running backs, but I don't like Steve's receivers. Where I like Eddie's running backs, but I don't love his receivers. I think Eddie had more of a safe play throughout the draft, but that definitely gives him a chance each week where he's not praying for a boom or bust type of guy. Though I think it's going to be quarterback play. I think Eddie got great value in Jordan Love, and Steve goes 0-1 this week.
Right. Next up is Buffalo Kid, the Kid versus Jeff.
Going the opposite way, Anthony really went risky with some of those rookie picks. Not Harrison, but starting Worthy, I think is going to be a little bit interesting. And I think Wilson finally having a quarterback that can actually throw the ball, it's going to set it up. But I still can't go against the old cocaine god. So I think, despite the strong draft from Anthony, I think Jeff takes it this week.
Yeah, uh, I would be more inclined to pick Jeff if he kept his name as Triple X Cocaine God 69420 and said it's Hawk Nakua, which I thought that joke had already faded. They got their 15 minutes.
Not for Jeff, it hasn't.
Jeff, if you're listening to this, please change your name back.
You know what it needs to be. Just make it happen.
All right. Kenny versus Ryan.
So this is a curious match, and much like Val, Ryan really came locked in, just solid strategy, knew what he wanted, knew who he didn't want, and Kenny didn't do that. I didn't love his draft. I don't think Lockett or Mostert are gonna have good years. I think Mostert more than Lockett, but I think A-Chain is gonna take over, and I just don't think Mostert's gonna have a great year. You really got to hope that Lockett booms on the weeks you start him, but he can also just be a barren wasteland on your starting lineup. I don't love Kyron for Ryan, but regardless, I'm getting Ryan 1-0 this week.
You're such a H-hand stan.
He's a sexy pick. That's all I'm saying. He's a sexy pick. He
Any
scored
thoughts
like
on
the
any
1,000
thoughts
points on
on
the bench last year.
any thoughts on Ryan's nickname so far this year? We got Jew nearly ran. That's
Yeah, it's a little
controversial.
racist. Yeah.
Judo Van Kid, Wanna Mrs. Robot, provocative thoughts?
Let me look at some of his because yeah, the
We got
Jew,
wrinkly emails, dark
yeah, that's a
pockets,
yeah, Methodist van. Jew nearly ran. Yeah, that one's a little racist, but hey, do what you got to do. Judo
chili
van
jungle
kid.
llama, chili jingle llama,
Jesus, that also sounds a little racist.
and aloha
Um,
jumper is a favorite from last year making a return. I only wish my biggest regret
yeah.
from the draft is that Ryan did not get Jake Ferguson because we missed out on Nero fake jugs.
An all-time anagram for that one. I do like Rebecca Thrill, Artillery Glee. That's a good one. Methodist Judo Van Kid. I do like that one. I feel like Njoku could have gone sideways, but he pulled that one off there. I mean, he's gonna keep doing them no matter what happens. He's gonna keep on dropping those names. Some are really good, and some are.
I've come to appreciate it. Last year, I thought I questioned it. It gives me a good laugh now.
Now it's a staple because every time he
Yeah.
picks up a player, now you just gotta know. All right, what's the nickname gonna be? And it could be Jew ran early.
All right. Last matchup. Do I even need to ask about this one? Bedin versus Kevin.
You don't have to, but we will. And this is the section we always reserve for Val because it'd always be God, Val's team sucks. Here's a loss for her. Din, you've officially taken over that section where this is just a win for Kevin. I didn't like Din's draft outside of Bijan and Kelsey. Kevin's going to take this one by a long shot.
All right. So to recap, in the Matt versus Sean matchup, Matt has picked Matt. In the Justin versus Val matchup, Matt has picked me. In the Steve versus Eddie matchup, Matt's got Eddie. AY versus Jeff, Matt's taking Jeff. And then Kenny versus Ryan, Matt is taking Ryan. And to wrap us up, Matt is picking Kevin over Din. That's everything that we got for you guys. Next week, when we come back, we'll review some of these matchups, see how Matt did in the picks. We'll come at you with the first power rankings of the new season, and then we'll review the next week's matchups. Hope everyone has good luck. There's no big injuries this weekend. Let's have some fun and let's go talk some shit to each other. All right.
Hell yeah.
Peace.